a beer in one show and you're going on to another. It's gonna get rough.
I love it.
Please, can I just ask a favor of the chat room? Don't mention Swift.
Those are my favorite kinds of shows. Those are the best kinds of shows.
I've seen the clicks. They're very good, but they're very bad for me. So let's just.
Yeah, you know what? Having the network effect, I can.
What's this sexy new background?
Yeah, you like
Chris?
that? Yeah, you like that?
Oh my
It's our new standby
God.
screen. I know. I've been looking at the numbers across the shows, and I haven't had the heart to tell Noah yet. But it's true for a lot of the shows. But it's the most prominent on the Ask Noah show. The most popular Ask Noah shows are the one where he covers Microsoft in the title. So, I just think there's a bit of irony that some of Noah's most popular shows are the ones where he talks about Microsoft. But it's true for some of our other shows on the network. The Microsoft shows seem to be driving more and more interest these days. Wonder what that's about, huh? I think the Linux community is trying to wrap their head around what Redmond's doing.
Maybe they're Satya curious.
Yeah, I think they are. I think they're getting a little Satya Nadella curious. I think they are. They got a little Delanella. I don't know what that means. That sounds like a really dirty thing. All right, so
no, but I'm putting that in the show somehow. I'm gonna find a way to say Delanella now.
We got a little Delanella going. All right, so it's coder.show, and
nothing can satiate me except for Satya. Oh, I got a lot. We're good to go.
All right.
I think that we should all make those businesses fail.
All right, I should.
You mean like Yahoo.com?
I met a guy who's working at Oath inside Verizon, and it's dark days there.
It's got to be rough.
It is.
Yeah.
They got no identity. They got no purpose. It's weird. All right, so this is the Coder Radio program, though, and we're going to get started right here, right now. Chat room, please bang suggest as we go along. We could use your suggestions. And the Coder Show begins now, right here. This is the Coder Show in 3, in a 2. Not that fast. That was another soundboard misfire. The problem is the keyboard is hanging off the desk, and sometimes my hand rests on the keyboard and it slams the keys up into my finger, and it's causing this stupid soundboard to trigger. All right, so
and if it were a MacBook, the key would get stuck, and we'd just be playing the same soundboard sound over and over again for hours.
Just the one thing. All right, here we go. It's the Coder program. Rana, right there. Here. This is Coder Radio, episode 315, recorded June 25th, 2018. Hey y'all, we be fixing to do the Coder Radio program, a weekly talk show taking a pragmatic look, and sometimes a look at the art and business of software development and its related technologies. This episode is brought to you by them fine folks over at DigitalOcean and Linux Academy. Thank you for asking. My name is Chris, and joining us every gosh darn week is our host down there in Florida. Why, it's Mr. Dominic. Hello, Mike.
Escúchame. Someone's putting my picture on the ofrenda.
You know,
I just saw Coco, the movie, and I swear to God, I'm going to haunt you.
I feel like it would almost be worth learning Russian just to troll me in one intro. You know, like you come in just throwing a whole bunch of Putin at me.
Challenge accepted. That was Spanish, but challenge accepted.
I know, but it made me think. Imagine if he was speaking Putin. That would be much more impressive.
And first of all, my good friend Ed is rather fluent in Russian these days.
Yeah, I would imagine so. He's getting pretty comfortable, I would hope. Well, Mr. Dominic, we are committing a little bit of a podcast violation, a little bit of a podcast party foul, if you will. We are recording 2 episodes back to back, which you should never do. And this is the second one, so it's guaranteed to be twice as good. As everybody knows, that's the law of podcast dynamics. Or drunk, depending if one of us has been drinking, or both. Maybe.
Both.
We'll find out.
But I think one a lot faster than the other. But
I wonder who that could be.
but it's a Florida beer. It's High Ally by Cigar City Brewing. They're not a sponsor, but God damn it, they should be.
You know, we should take a moment here in the show and say hello to editor Ham Radio. Mr. Ham Radio has begun editing the fine Coder Radio program out of his bunker, and he's been doing a fantastic job. I didn't say anything for the first couple of weeks just in case he really screwed it up.
But he'd fire his ass just like, get the fuck out.
Yeah. But you know what? As Mike says,
get out of here.
You gotta
get out of here. Get out of here.
I feel like I can make a mix out of that. Like we could do like a.
Get the hell out of here. Get out of here. Get the hell out of here.
Do you still have the best one?
Oops, not that one. Not that one.
Yeah, no, not that one. That's the confusing one.
Yeah. No. Which one's your favorite? I mean, because I have several. Is it?
We used to have a really.
Oh, I don't have that.
Inappropriate?
Lost the really? Oh.
Yeah, I still have inappropriate. Business is my favorite.
Let me see.
Business?
Which one's business? I don't.
Yeah, yeah.
Business?
That's just a good one. Right there.
I think the really was something like this. Really?
All right.
It was very cartoony, like, yeah.
Somebody clip that for me. I also I did make a dedicated RMS soundboard, although I haven't been using it much.
It's
Please
spyware.
don't.
Yeah, I know. It's just in case.
Damn it.
It's just in case.
What happens to you is not sufficiently important to justify the wrong you're doing.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit. All that matters is what happens to me.
You could also hear Lunduk's mocking sniff there. Listen very carefully.
What happens to you?
You hear that right there?
Yeah.
That's
Poor
great.
Lunduk trying to sell his Real Basic software, and this guy's just slagging him off on his own show. Yeah, that's
a worst case scenario right there.
yeah, that's not what you want. Yeah.
Well, so we're gathered here today to talk about a rather serious topic. So we're starting light because we got an email into the show that I think is going to kick things off, and I'd really like to get the audience's input. So before we go any further, I want to tell you about our contact page because I'm not going to mention it going for any after this. So this is it. Coder.show/contact. We'd love to get your thoughts on what we're about to talk about. But Scott writes into the show today with an email about chicken farms and app stores. And he's making a comparison between an old business and a new business. He says, in a previous life, I worked at a company that made software that was sold to large companies. One of our clients was a large chicken producer whose name you would recognize. They used to hatch eggs and then sell the baby chicks to farmers who would raise them and then bring them back after a few weeks, after which they would be finished by the company. The company would set the price on each, and the farmers would guarantee a certain number of chickens. The reason they did this was the period of time was the most uncertain for the chicks, this period of time where the farmers had them. And this was the most often when losses would occur. By outsourcing, they could have certainty in their supply. Some of the farmers would get wiped out from time to time, but they let that be someone else's problem. This was a while ago. My memory may be failing me, but it reminded me a lot of app stores and doing the same kind of thing. I think these big companies have learned that it takes a lot of time and money to develop apps, and nobody really knows if it's going to take off or not. So rather than paying to develop something that may never pan out, they simply take 30 or 40% of the winners and let the small shops, etc., take all of the risk and lose all of the money. Cheers.
Correct. And if you read any business books, what that's called is commoditizing your compliments.
Your compliments,
It's yeah. So basically, not compliments in the terms that you're thinking. Compliments and like things that make your platform or your product better. You capture the value from them, and
Sure.
you externalize all the risk. Exactly what the writer is saying. Yeah. So yeah, that is why I've been pissed off for a long time.
Yes.
You got it. Like,
Yep. And you
Congratulations.
actually, even just recently on June 24th, on the @Duminoko Twitter feed, you tweeted out a story about how tech companies are conquering America's cities. Now, that's a really kind of attention-grabbing headline, but I just watched a Beam documentary. Yeah, they're still making documentaries about Mountain View, California, about the fact that pretty much anybody who's in the service industry for the tech companies in the California area is becoming fully employed homeless. They have jobs. They are employed. They are janitors. They are security. They're groundskeepers. And they simply cannot afford to live in the California area, but that's where the job is. Like, Google needs a lot of security people. Google needs a lot of janitors. And they work with these third-party companies to hire these janitors, and some of these janitors fail, and some of them make it. And this Beam documentary, which I'll put a link to in the show notes, did a great job, I thought, of really showing how there's no way they can win, and they are forced to live out of their vehicles. Now, that's the California area. This is happening all over the country, though, and there's a pretty controversial thing happening right now in the Seattle area between Seattle and Amazon.
Homelessness in Seattle is a big problem, but Amazon cried uncle when they were asked to foot the bill. Weeks after the city passed what is called a head tax, the city council now saying, never mind, after Amazon threatened to leave the city. The bill would have forced businesses that pull in over $20 million to pay $275 per employee. For Amazon, the city's largest employer, that would have been more than $12 million a year. But smaller businesses with tighter margins would have felt it even more. Here now, Bill Bennett, host of the Bill Bennett podcast and a Fox News contributor.
A podcast now. You know, you just have to be a podcaster to get on Fox News now. So that battle has been going back and forth here in Seattle. I just put a link. Making Rent in Silicon Valley is the title of the Beam News episode. And it's pretty hard to watch, to be honest with you, because you have people that are living in their cars and in their RVs without power, so that way they can go to work. And you have to start to ask, what responsibility do the individual developers in these companies have? We've also heard stories about Microsoft employees getting upset about Microsoft's contract with ICE, with recent immigration issues. We've heard stories about Google employees that were leaving because of the contracts that Google had to give AI facial recognition and object recognition to the Pentagon for their drone program. And so you had people at Google who were quitting, and Google had to release this AI paper about how they're going to properly use artificial intelligence, and they did not renew their contract. It has been this meta topic brewing for weeks now. And underneath all of it is, well, what are you going to do about it? You, the employee, the person that's going to work and writing the code for the software that's helping organize detention centers, or helping recognize terrorists to be shot down by drones, or just displacing people out of their homes. What are you going to do about it? And that's really been the part that nobody's really touched on yet. And I'm curious to think, if you think, Mike, if I'm being too hard on the individual developers that are working for these individual cogs that are part of these larger machines.
I do think you're being a little too hard. So, in the case, no one in the private sector, at least, is compelled to stay at their job, right? Unless you're enlisted in the military, you are not compelled to stay.
Yeah, financial obligations, home,
yeah,
family.
But no. That's not compulsion. You could quit. You might lose your house. You might go on welfare. You might have a lot of bad things happen to you, but you absolutely can walk out. No one's going to stop you. No one's going to pull a gun on you. You don't want to give up your, I'm going to take a harder position than I wanted to, but because it's actually what I believe. Whining that you make six figures in Silicon Valley and that you have a moral obligation to what your company does is insane and tone deaf, when the guy who makes your coffee or the girl who cleans up the office, vice versa, it doesn't matter, right? Gender neutral, can't afford a place to live. You're in a position of privilege and power, and you have some moral objection. Now, if you do, I respect that. I may not agree with you. In one of the cases, I do agree with you, and the other I don't. I'm sure you know which is which. But you are not there under duress. You are not an enlisted member of the military. Walk out. You can simply walk out. You lose your money. You lose your job. You lose your health care. You lose a lot of stuff. But you're not there under duress. And there are many people who would gladly take your job. Now, if you said, okay, my issue is I want to help these people, and I want to agitate within Google, within Microsoft, within any of these companies to, so the thing I feel that article you quoted missed, Chris, is like Microsoft very famously, I'm going to use them as an example. They had secretaries and janitors become millionaires. Do you know why? When they first IPO'd.
Stock.
But go even higher than that. Abstract it away. Because the janitor at Microsoft, the first janitor that Bill Gates or whoever hired, was a Microsoft employee.
Mm-hmm.
He may have just been a janitor. I was a janitor when I was 15. But you know what? His employee badge was Microsoft.
Right.
Not, I'm going to make up a company, not clean your office.
Not like the chicken farmers. See, that's what we have now, is we have chicken farmers everywhere.
So the problem is externalization. right? It's the thing about commoditizing your compliments again. The problem is these service workers are not Google employees. Let me give you a fabulous example. And in fact, I don't know if this is true or not. So I hope that some of my old friends up north will confirm or deny this later, and we'll correct it next week. I spent a lot of time at Google Chelsea in New York, and they have. Chris, have you ever been there to the Google campus in Chelsea, New York?
No, not New York. No, I have been in Seattle and
Fabulous.
California, but not in New York.
Fabulous place, and I'm using, of course, the way I use fabulous, the original meaning of fabulous, not
Yeah.
you know.
Well, it probably is also very fabulous, I would imagine.
Well, I mean, I also like musical theater, so I'm not the best.
I'm
right
not
here.
complaining because you know what? Google's fairly fabulous all around. They're a fabulous company.
No, I mean, I had, you know what? I had a truly phenomenal meal.
Yeah.
Lovely cup of Ethiopian fair trade. Jesus Christ would approve of this coffee. I mean, the young lady serving it to me spent more time explaining to me what I was drinking than what I pouring it.
That's funny.
I sincerely hope that she was a Google employee. And I believe that they are at Google. I believe, at least in New York, there are employees.
I wouldn't be so sure of that.
You think that's wrong?
Yeah, I mean,
But there's a big difference, right? Even if you're only making, let's say, New York City, I think the minimum wage is like $9.50 an hour. So even if she was only making $9.50 an hour, being a Google employee gives her a certain cachet in the market,
right.
And all Google employees are, I believe, now I could be wrong, I haven't, I don't have intimate knowledge, do have some stock option rights or privileges. I think it's technically a privilege, not a right, but it's irrelevant. That is how you get the Bill Gates' original secretary became a millionaire, and he could barely afford to pay her when he hired her, right?
Mm-hmm.
This idea that you're going to outsource every single function of your company is not good, especially for these things like assistants, things like secretaries. When I say secretary, I of course mean admin assistant. That to me, that's different than a regular assistant. Folks who are managing the kitchen, office managers, coffee baristas, whatever. Those are stepping stone jobs that need to exist.
I so agree, and it is a hollowing out of the corporation that has happened across the entire industry. And any of our listeners that work in a large business have watched this happen, where the janitorial staff is a different company. The IT staff is a different company. The designers for your main product are a different company. And it's all outsourced. And it's getting worse and worse. So you have that problem, which leads to these part-time jobs that don't have benefits. But then and the New York Times article that I've linked in the show notes draws a good point to this. There's the issue that nobody cares. Nobody cares because the only thing people care about right now are national issues and large world issues, Trump and things like that. They don't care about what's happening in your local precinct. I don't even know like who the mayor of the town I'm in is anymore. I don't even follow that anymore. I don't know who my mayor is.
You really don't know that?
No, I used to, but that was years ago. I've been so distracted by national
issues. So I made a comment for the beer of the week for the 2 episodes we recorded today. Sorry to break the fourth wall there. It's High Alive from Cigar City. Why? I am very intentionally, when I buy things, spending as much money in my local economy as much as possible.
Yeah, I follow that.
Right. Well, no, but it's not just. But think about it. It's a virtuous circle of I spend money. Maybe the brewery can hire another kid at a high school to do some work. Maybe that kid doesn't break into my house, right?
Yeah.
I got to be honest with you. Like, it seems insane to me that you wouldn't care about local issues.
Yeah, I think it is, and I don't think I'm speaking just for myself. I think it is a big part. People are just completely unaware of the situation. They're just so hyper-focused on the big distracting conversation that's being led by social media and the news.
Well, I mean, there's a whole conversation about how people have become addicted to Facebook. So can I twist your question? Because I realize I did dodge your question, but if the guys who are running software for drones ought to feel culpability, I would argue that Facebook has affected far more people and has made them hopelessly addicted to it. Should they not feel culpability? Should they not feel the weight of what they've done to society?
Can't you make that same argument for any like successful video game or fast food restaurant? Or...
I could, but if you do some research, you can see that teenagers, the suicide rate has gone up because they're comparing themselves to each other on Facebook, and they're getting false impressions of each other. We talked about this a number of weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
Facebook alone has had a huge impact on society. And I would argue a mostly negative impact.
Seems so.
Which is weird because they were trying to recruit me for a job a couple months ago, which I declined.
It does seem like it's been a negative in total.
Like I would argue that your Lockheeds, your Northrops have much less blood on their hands right now than
Whoa.
I would go that far.
Really?
Yeah, I think Facebook is actually like morally, like not only is it wrong, it's a product that ought not to exist.
So I bring you back to my original question. Should those developers, those individual cogs, feel bad? Should they quit?
Yeah, you should resign. But you should also accept the pain that comes with doing that.
That's just the thing that never happens.
And let me tell you why. The difference is, let's take good old my good friend Ed Snowden's former employer, Booz Allen. You're generally in a military situation. Facebook is... Do the research. I know a lot of people who listen to the show. Some do work at Facebook. Are not going to like this. Do the research on the teen suicide rate, and try to tell me that that's not worse than anything any of these military folks are doing. And the addiction rate, of people on Facebook.
But that's a boy. Because it's like sort of arguing. You're sort of arguing against a free market where new products can be.
Let me make it easier for you. Heroin's illegal for a reason. Facebook is more addictive. It should be illegal.
Yeah, I have a hard time making it. I also would argue heroin should be legal. So.
Well, but then what do you do with the people who are hopelessly addicted?
We already have we already have that problem. That's already a thing.
Oh no, but this is my point. We have more people who are addicted to Facebook than we do to heroin.
Yeah.
They're functioning addicts. Many of them are functioning addicts. So, I mean, you could argue that like there are lots of functioning alcoholics walking around, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's okay. But I do worry about young people in particular.
Yeah, I'm definitely not looking forward to my kids getting into social media.
I mean, you have a daughter, you have 2 sons, right? I have a son.
I think I would, unless they had no other prospects, and like say they had multiple, say it's just fantasy world, they had a couple of job offers and one of them was Facebook. I feel like I would discourage him from taking the Facebook job.
I would actively discourage my son. Yeah, I would say go work at McDonald's.
Wow.
Sorry, recruiter who keeps emailing me.
I mean, so how do you go from? So this is all. You know what it is. It's easy for us to say. We're not the ones that have the rent due and the medical bill. You know.
Yeah. No.
It's easy for us to say. I
don't know.
Easy.
I mean, everybody has to make their own compromises, and it's fine. I don't begrudge anyone who listens to the show. If you work for Facebook, it's not personal. It's in fact, if I would argue that if you take offense to what I say, don't just tune out. Think about it. What can you do as someone on the ground there, if you don't want to quit your job, to say, you know what, there are things we are doing that are having negative externalities, and these externalities are bad, right? Like they're super bad. What can I do? And you know, be a pain in the ass in the meeting. Don't just browse your own Facebook feed or Twitter or whatever during the meeting. Say, no, what is the end? Like, challenge, say, what are we doing? Raise an objection when someone tells you that they're going to do this to, quote unquote, increase engagement. Because increasing engagement is actually a way of, it's addiction, right? These companies employ psychologists for a reason, is to addict people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, this took a dark turn.
Yeah, it did. All right, well, let's take a moment. Let's catch our breath. Let's thank DigitalOcean, do.co/coder. Just Coder, do.co/coder. Go there. You can get a $100 credit for DigitalOcean for 60 days when you sign up with a new account. They have optimized compute types, so you can choose from a standard droplet or maybe a CPU-optimized droplet, or customize with the flexibility of the mix-and-match droplets to do whatever kind of workload you might need. They have the best pricing in the business, and they also have the best features. They have enterprise-grade SSDs, 40 gigabit connections coming to the hypervisors, the best dashboard in the biz to do it all, as well as an API for days. Oh, there's so many things I could tell you about DigitalOcean, but today I want to tell you about that documentation. Nothing like DigitalOcean's community. We mentioned meetups last time. Well, this time I'm telling you about the tutorials. It's totally worth checking out. You go to digitalocean.com/community, but start by going to do.co/coder. So that way you support the show. And you get that $100 credit. They have a bunch of new documentation on Kubernetes right now if you're trying to wrap your head around how to set that up appropriately. Also, some great documentation for Ubuntu 18.04 as it came out. And of course, because DigitalOcean knows what's up, they have some great tutorials on setting up GitLab, continuous deployment with GitLab Runner, and all of that running on top of the DigitalOcean infrastructure. Also, if you're not familiar with DigitalOcean Spaces, their S3 compatible storage, they have a tutorial on how to use FileZilla with that. It's so handy. I use that a ton to send large files around when I was on the road. There's so many different ways you can get started with DigitalOcean, so just pick something and go with do.co/coder. And then start working with it. See what you can do and get just familiar with the service. You'll be really impressed. do.co/coder. One more thing on tech companies taking over the cities of America. This is one part great, one part awful. Domino's has announced that they're going to pave America's potholes. And as part of the program, they are going to have customers, I can't even believe this, mark issues in the road, and then Domino's will go out and fix the pothole, and then they're going to stamp it with a Domino's logo. So the potholes that have been fixed will be branded. And the whole thing is we're using an app to mark where the potholes are, and then we're going out there and paving it so that way we can deliver the pizza even faster.
Okay, so wasn't there a movie from the late 80s, early 90s about this where like a bunch of private companies take over basic government functions?
This is what's happening now, right?
Like I feel like I'm living the nightmare of 1989 right now.
Is this what happens? Is maybe they solve the housing issue? Maybe they start building
right. Just like Domino's just build a bunch of apartments,
or Google,
right?
or Amazon,
sure,
right?
Oh, Google might fix the internet problem with net neutrality by simply laying a bunch of their own frickin' fiber.
Yeah,
right. Like
you could have Google Housing where everybody has a Google Assistant in every pod, and it's all tied in. You get a Google account, and it's $300 a month instead of $1,300 a month, which is what it would normally be.
Okay, but isn't this frightening?
Super, super frightening.
We're getting a little unfiltered here.
It's like the basic functionality of the country is being supplemented by corporations, which are now as powerful and as rich as nations.
Right. Yeah, that's almost exactly what's happening.
I saw a projection today that Microsoft in about 3 years will be worth $1 trillion. And Apple is quickly on their way to being worth, sooner than 3 years, $1 trillion. And then if you take just the Seattle area, we have Amazon, we have Microsoft, we have Nintendo USA, and we have T-Mobile USA, and Boeing. That isn't quite a technology company, but all in that area, that's got to be over $1 trillion worth of value. And then the Silicon Valley area, you've got Apple, you've got Google, you've got HP, you've got all these companies in that area that are also worth billions of dollars. They're worth trillions together. They are a larger influence over people's daily lives. Look at your friends at Facebook, your buddy Mark Zuckerberg. He's influencing billions of people with his feed. Yeah, no, it's really a big topic. It's really something, isn't it?
It's huge because, I do not believe that the individual developer, IT worker at these companies is meaning to hurt people, right? I just don't believe that. But the aggregate effect is super evil. And to be clear, my issue, like I went after Facebook, I am not whining about the election because, I voted for Johnson, right? So I'm not that upset, but I'm upset with the other, to me, the big story of Facebook that is not being, and I'm going to leave them alone in a minute. It's not the 2016 election. It's the effect they're having on teenagers and young children. Like, you know what? I would let Putin buy as many fucking ads as he wants. No, and the CIA can also buy as many ads as they want, and I'm sure they do, right? Through a number of front companies.
Sure, they probably do. Yeah.
Right. So let's just all, if you want a free market, like, this is my problem. You can't have semi-free markets. If you want a free market, it's the Wild West, and everybody gets a gun. Everybody can buy ads. Everybody can do everything. And may the best man win. If you don't want a free market, well, then you have to pick winners and losers. And I got to be honest, Facebook ought to be a loser. Now, Domino's Pizza, I think, is doing something clever, which involves stock pricing. Their multiples look much better if they're considered a technology company, which if you ever watch CNBC, they're desperately trying to pitch themselves as a technology company. Guess what? They make shitty pizza. They're not a technology company. And the fact that they're willing to pay for some potholes is not a laurel for them. It doesn't cost that much to pave a pothole. Your local municipality is too corrupt or too stupid to get the job done.
Yeah.
Right. The answer is don't buy more Domino's Pizza. It's go recall your mayor. Right? Like,
who is that
your
guy
mayor
again?
should have.
I don't remember who that guy is anymore.
Who gives a shit? Go and, who's ever in office, vote him out. I don't care. And I'm a registered, I'm an independent in Florida, but I was a registered Republican. If it's a Democrat, vote Republican. If it's a Republican, vote Democrat. Just get the guy who's in there out.
Get the hell
Don't
outta
let
here.
some pizza company or some frickin' website fix your potholes. Are you out of your mind?
Preach it, brother. I completely agree. I know it's a sad state of affairs. In fact, I got another example for you. Then we can get off this topic. But I got one more.
No, I doubt it. I doubt that I can. But keep going.
All right. Well, okay. All right. Well, then breather time. That means it's breather time. We're gonna just do it right now. Breather. linuxacademy.com/coders. That's the one that's got the S. linuxacademy.com/coders. It's going to be a huge month for Linux Academy next month, so this is a great time to sign up. 150 new hands-on types of contents, learning challenges, and there's going to be a live show all powered by Linux to give it all away. Oh my God, I can't wait to see how that all goes. It's all launching in July, but you can get started now. They got courseware on AWS, Google's cloud platform, containers in general, of course, Azure, and security is expanding rapidly at Linux Academy. It's a big topic there now. linuxacademy.com/coders. Go there, sign up for a free 7-day trial, and support the show. They've got hands-on labs. They'll deploy software in real environments, and then you take scenario-based labs that runs on them. If you ever have any questions, they have full-time instructors that are ready to help. And they can spin them up as part of the courseware. And, the thing is, too, is like, that back in the day would have saved me some money, because when I was learning AWS stuff, I definitely ran the clock up. And they're just launching so much more. They're doing live streams to cover some of it. And to go check their YouTube channel, you may see some of the stuff that they've done recently if it's after the fact. And they have posts up on their blog covering some of the new additions and content that are coming. It's a big push. While I was there, the whole company was working to get to this. So I know that they're really, really fired up about it because they're really proud of what's in the pipeline. And you can get started by going to linuxacademy.com/coders. They have a Lambda deep dive as one of the new courseware. Shh, don't tell anybody. But that was one of the things I overheard. It's a Lambda deep dive. Also, some AWS security specialty certifications and some Red Hat expertise in Ansible and full certified architect, full support for Red Hat as well. Our new courseware is going to be coming. linuxacademy.com/coders. Go there, learn more, and sign up for a free 7-day trial and try out the Linux Academy platform. That's linuxacademy.com/coders. Man, they ordered some, it's called Babe's Fried Chicken. Oh, man, some of the best fried chicken I had in my life.
It's a microaggression, Chris.
I'm sorry. I apologize. So the one last story I'll just kind of mention that kind of brings this all together is I noticed this happening in Austin. Apparently it was happening during WWDC in California. There's these scooter companies that are just dropping off scooters. They get activated via an app, and then you just putt around the whole town, and then you just get off and leave it like a toddler. You just leave it somewhere like a jerk. And then the company contracts out to these chicken farmers who come around and pick up the devices overnight and charge them at home and then go set them back up in the morning. And this is just some weird cycle that's started to just deploy throughout the country. And there's no laws on the books for this. And it's in fact, it's sort of the Uber model where they're rushing to just get out there and invade all of the cities as possible, so that way the local cities have to respond and sort of retroactively create laws, which are generally much, much more favorable for these scooter companies. And this is a strategy that Uber has really outlined, that now anybody that wants to do this is really doing it. Food trucks are doing this. It's sort of like the model now. And it's really, the tone is being set by business.
So the model is operate effectively as a criminal enterprise, and once the sheriff shows up, or if depending on where you are, the police commissioner, you then negotiate with him. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah. So you have
fabulous. I love it.
Birds. I think Bird is one of the more larger scooter companies. They started in Santa Monica, and they started back in last September and just started getting all over the places they could. And now there's just basically laws being written to accommodate them. And think about this though too. It depends on your perspective. If you like the scooter idea and you like sort of this act first and get forgiveness later kind of mentality, you really see nothing wrong with this. But there was kind of a time where like public transportation was like a core functionality of what our taxes paid for. And now that's kind of been gone. And instead you have these fly-by-night startups that sort of burst onto the scene. They acquire a whole bunch of talent. They stock up, and then they just try to make it work. And they're contracting out key parts of the business. So you've kind of have like this top-heavy organization where you've got developers and admin, and then all of the people doing the work, like actually collecting the scooters or driving people around in the case of Uber, they're all contractors. They're all chicken farmers.
So what does this mean for the individual developer today? Because in parallel to all of this, we're seeing, Chris, people in our industry are becoming more self-employed, as you and I are, right? Either they own their own business and have employees, or they're individual contractors. How do these two things mesh together in your mind for the individual, let's say, 24-year-old, C# dev or Java dev or whatever?
I don't know. I don't really see how this works out to make, a good, comfortable living where you can afford a decent car and get yourself a nice house and maybe crap out a couple of kids. I don't see how it leads to this. It's going to have to be a shift in what is normal. It's going to have to be the gig. It's going to be like the normalization of the gig economy. And you're going to have some folks like software developers and system administrators and the admin level that will have pretty good jobs, pretty reliable jobs with health insurance and all of that. And then you're going to have the chicken farmer economy where everybody else ends up having to farm chickens because that's what's left. And the businesses are not doing that as their core function anymore. Driving the actual car isn't the core functionality of Uber. What is the actual core functionality of Uber is connecting people.
To a vehicle.
Right.
So what this reminds me of is something I was bitching about in 2012 when we started this show, about how Apple was abusing iOS app developers, right? And they were basically making them serve at their pleasure, where even if you were an independent company, you effectively worked for Apple. Apple took a heavy tax, 30% plus a $100 fee a year, or at the time I think it was $200. No, I think it was just $100. And you could only do what they permitted you to do. How is that not just the extension of basically the App Store model?
Yeah.
Right, because what I see is all other trades or all other businesses or professions are now being appified, if I can coin that crappy term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I
right.
mean, look at the potholes, right? They're going to be a Domino's app where you mark a pothole with an app.
Well, because this feels like, I mean, we can, and if you're a new listener, I would challenge you to go back to the back catalog, audio quality on my end, forgiven. This is exactly what I was railing against. But I was railing against it I was trying to build productivity iOS and iPad applications. Yeah. And just like Apple put up so many barriers, and basically if you were not, remember Coding Horror, Chris, what's his name? Jeff, one of the Stack Overflow guys, I can't remember, but the website is codinghorror.com. Around that same time, wrote a piece called Serving at the Pleasure of the King, regarding his own views on the Apple situation. And it is, he used that, and he actually had a picture of Louis XIV. It is a very feudalistic system. In my eyes, and maybe I'm being overly simplistic, We have replicated this awful system that was afflicting independent software developers. And I get it. It's really hard to be sympathetic to independent software developers because, you know, even back then, you know, I was making decent money, right? Like maybe I lost money 1 year or whatever, but, you know, software developers are not the most sympathetic group.
Yeah.
But taxi drivers, which is effectively what Uber is, there are apps for like cleaning your house now that I've even looked into it. The prices I would be paying, I can't believe anybody's living anywhere near that.
Oh, there is,
right?
huh? I should look at that.
You should look at it.
Rover is another one for dog walking and dog sitting.
Oh, I didn't even know about this. Yeah, I
Yeah.
should look into that too.
And we just tried out on our trip. We just tried out Turo, which is
that?
It's like Airbnb for cars. So instead of them
Interesting.
driving you, you get their car. And of course, the ones that are the most competitive are like the Teslas and the Mercedes and really tricked out Jeeps and stuff. So while we were at Linux Academy, for $60 a day, we got a nice Mercedes with great air conditioning, great drive, smooth, that we could just drive around. And we just a spur of the moment, we're like, you know, it'd be really nice to have a car. It's like on the second day of being there, like, let's order a car for 3 days via an app. It's crazy.
So I guess I would ask you and ask the audience, in your mind, I mean, am I insane? Like, to me, what I see in the world is basically my worst nightmare from 2012 realized in a much grander scale than I ever could have imagined.
Yeah, it seems like it. Yeah.
Right. Like, because it feels like to me, not only did it happen to software developers, it happened to everybody else too.
Yeah, it was part of a larger economic shift. Like we were looking at it under a microscope in our particular area, if we when you zoom out, it's a shift happening in a lot of industries, and it's all being sort of enabled by technology, better connectivity, smartphones in our pockets, the internet, which allows a great amount of outsourcing and remote work, like we've recently talked about. It's all of it coming together into this. And really, it's those dark matter developers that are the best positioned to weather it. Those ones that we talk about all the time, they're the best positioned.
To weather the storm.
Yeah.
Right. Contractors like me are in a lot of danger, actually, because, we have to go where the wind blows. But I do wonder, and we can get off this shortly, but I think of things in terms of systems and architectures, right? If you have a large number of people who are working these gig type jobs with no benefits and very low wages, it's one thing to pay someone, $20-something an hour and give them no benefits. They should be able to find a way. But, the guy cleaning the office is making like $9 an hour at Amazon or whatever, right? Like whatever minimum wage is in Seattle, that's what he's making. Aren't we going to come to a place where the system is not able to absorb, what if he slips and hurts himself? What if he has some, God forbid, medical issue?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, genetics is a bitch. What if the guy has cancer?
Let me introduce you to my buddy Bernie Sanders, who would like us all to have a universal income and single-payer health care.
I don't think we should have universal income, but I think there... Well, no, but here's the thing. If we're going to go down this path, there has to be something. And this is the guy who wants lower taxes saying this, right? And I know we're way off Coda Radio and deeply into Unfiltered, but...
Yeah, I suppose. It's like a hybrid now.
It's a hybrid.
Because it really all does come back to the damn developers.
Well, no. You know what it all comes back to? With those dirty, filthy politicians.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, really. Yeah, you're right. I guess the onus is on the politicians, not the developers, which was my earlier position in the show was, shouldn't these people be quitting their jobs and forcing these companies to change their ways? But the reality is they're taking advantage of a marketplace. It still seems really brutal, but the onus really is on the politicians to fix the problem, not the developers.
Right. It's hard to ask a business not to do something that's completely legal, especially if their competitors are doing it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I can't disagree with that at all. So is it then immoral for the developers to be writing software for AI recognition or Facebook addiction or Google data collection?
I mean, I can't go that far because everybody's got to feed their family, but I would say if you're going to stay where you are, particularly in that big white F and blue house, maybe you should see yourself, and I'm going to use a Stargate reference, as kind of the Tok'ra, an infiltrator. like slowly steer the conversations towards moral ends.
See if you can at least make a difference. That's not bad.
And if you get caught, cyanide capsules all around. Zuck butchers his own food. Just keep that in mind.
Ooh, yeah, that is an interesting thing.
Yeah.
Is that still a thing?
I believe it's still a thing. You know, I would love to talk to him one day, and like, because I love to beat up on Facebook because I kind of think they're the worst company in existence right now.
Sure, naturally.
But I'm sure he does not view himself as the bad guy.
No, he's connecting
Like-
families. He's making people
Right, and maybe he could convince us. Like, maybe there is something we're missing. It's possible. We're human. We could be wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I would eat your hat and my hat, and I know where your hat's been.
Wow.
So,
I don't know. Don't know about that. Well, all right. So let's probably put an end on this thing because we've probably talked this thing to death. We should probably move on. But it has been a meta topic that I think both you and I were kind of kicking around. And so in a way, we've just sort of had the pragmatist versus practical conversation. You know what I mean? Like we just sort of worked it out a little bit. But it is something that
Yeah.
I've been thinking more about. Like, how can I actually don't want to get too practical because I feel like that's actually been a mistake I've made in the past. And I think that's probably the same battle that people are having. You and I were going to have more of a conversation about it. I don't know if you have any thoughts before we go, but does this play into pragmatist versus sort of like an idealist when it comes to your job?
yeah, I think there's multiple levels, right? Like, obviously, there's is what I'm doing completely evil? But there's also the stupid, like, tribalism side. Like, you know what? If you need to use a Mac or Windows 10 for a job, and particularly Windows 10, it's okay. I worry. So I do worry that something weird has happened within the software development community where it has mirrored our political landscape and become super tribal. Like the Apple podcast dare not criticize Apple except on the access of the Mac Pro. But even then they soften the punches, right? And there's Windows podcasts that aren't that successful because it's Windows. And there's Linux podcasts that basically are all about these weird personality conflicts and blah, blah, blah. Who wrote a nasty email when he quit his thing, whatever. Who gives a shit?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, and I know you hate the drama side of the open source thing. I do too. It's getting boring. You know, I've been around long enough that it's like, okay, so you have a family and you don't want to do this project anymore. Makes a ton of sense to me. Sounds good. Give it to somebody else. Something has... So I don't know if I perceive it more because like more people email me now. And maybe you're actually a good barometer of this because you've been doing this whole podcast thing longer than I have. But I feel the tribalism is much more bitter and much more... I don't know, man. Like if I have to use Windows 10 for a couple months to do a job, I'll just use Windows 10 for a couple months. Right? Like if I have to use Mac, I'll use Mac. If I have to use, you know, I prefer to use Pop right now, but that could change, right? It doesn't matter to me.
Is it more tribal, though? Is that your question?
Well, it feels more tribal, particularly among the Apple camp, I would say.
I don't know if it's more tribal, but I think access to Virtue Signal is more plentiful. So you have more people that can virtue signal at you that you're doing something wrong or right. They have like more means. Telegram, IRC, Twitter are all like just like instant methodologies. Then you have email and Reddit and DMs and all of these other methods which are a little bit slower, but still very available. And then, you know, you have means outside of that too. So it's like there's just layers on top of layers for people depending on their preference and to get a message in front of you. So it definitely feels like there's more ways for people to express their opinion about stuff that normally people wouldn't have expressed an opinion about in the past. But as to what people get tribal about, I suspect it's always been the same. It's just perhaps emotions are turned up a little bit extra right now.
So, devil's advocate. Like I'm seeing a lot of tribalism on the Apple side of life. Is it because they're feeling a little weak right now? Right? Just that, like, you know, the hardware sucked. Right? Right. There's been a lot of problems on their side of the street.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm hearing? And because I'm very vocal in my criticism, people are emailing me
Yeah.
things that are like crazy.
Definitely soft. Like they have a soft spot right now, and you're poking the soft
Right.
spot.
And I'm poking the soft spot, so they're getting overly defensive.
Yeah, you'll see that too in like with Linux users. If you start talking about like say the MacBooks, when the MacBooks right now they're like, oh, it's no big challenge, but when the MacBooks get refreshed and they're competitive again, it's a soft spot. And you start talking about Final Cut and stuff like that, it's definitely a soft spot. And you'll hear more vocal pushback. Yeah, I think that definitely plays a role into it, is insecurity, because a big part of it is people wrap up their identities into these choices. So Linux represents a choice of freedom, and it represents maybe more grassroots approach, or a better way of doing technology, and it open source development and community and collaboration. That's and I support those things, and I believe in those things. And so when you attack Linux, you're attacking those things, and you're attacking what I believe in. But I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a podcaster.
So that sounds more like religion than technology. But
Yeah, I think somebody said something to me weeks ago, and it's really stuck. Like that same dogmatic attitude is the same kind of dogmatism that can be a religious dogmatism, it can be a racist dogmatism, it can be a methodology. Like it's the same model and framework of thinking. It's just we're talking about technology and Linux and open source, so we don't think of it as a particular bad thing. But if we had a racist podcast where we're talking about the whites and the blacks, all of a sudden, these things would have a completely different context. But it's the same model of thinking behind it, whether it's what distribution you prefer or what race you prefer. And people don't like hearing that. But if you think about it, it's the same brain mechanics behind both kinds of things. They're personally identifiable things that you wrap up in your own ego. So they're things that make up who you are. They're beliefs about who you are, as a Linux advocate or as an open source developer or as an Apple person or as an Apple pundit. This makes up who you are because Apple's one of the most important technology companies in the world, and I follow them closely, and I understand them in a way nobody else does, so it's part of their identity. Or I just bought this $3,000 MacBook, and I'm going to create iOS applications, and Swift is the best thing that's ever been created, and that's how I'm going to build my career. It's part of who they are. And when you go after it, you're really touching on some nerves. And I think the availability of Twitter, again, and Telegram and all of those immediate mediums make it much more pronounced. So it's like always been there because it's the same fundamental wiring in our brains that's made us do a lot of other dumb things like burn witches. But we haven't had this instant communications platforms that's really ubiquitous, especially in our niche. So the tribalism's just louder.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I saw a lot of it, obviously, when Microsoft acquired GitHub, although it's not actually done yet, right? It seems... in that case, it seems to me a reasonable objection is consolidation in the technology sector is bad because we're already so consolidated. We do need a good crop of B or C companies. But the reality of the way California and Silicon Valley in particular startups work is GitHub has raised too much goddamn money to actually live on its own, right? There's a weird situation where if you run a P&L on like GitHub, the Madbotter, and Thoughtbot, the order of profitability goes Thoughtbot, the Madbotter, and GitHub last. Because they're not making any money,
yeah.
Right? They're not like I have this old school business mentality. I guess I got from my grandfather that like. You're not really in business until you turn a frickin' profit, or at least can pay yourself. And like, who, like all the stuff I saw on Reddit, which granted is a biased place, about GitHub was no one had the stones to come up and say, and then I did, but I got downvoted into oblivion, that this is not a functional company. By any traditional metric. If you believe the VC no profitability to IPO path, then yeah, sure, it's traditional. Thank you, Netscape, for fucking up the whole world of how business actually works. But I don't know, man.
That's why I think it was inevitable, the purchase.
Of course, because they weren't making any money, right?
And the reactions just don't take that into consideration.
No, they think that like running on debt is great and you can do that forever.
They're not even thinking about that. People are very, very bad at having any kind of insight into the business end of things unless they've been in the position of running a business. I say that as somebody who went from not knowing anything about business to running a business for a while. You just don't know what you don't know until you go do it. And then you're like, oh shit, if I would have known how much I had to learn, I would have never started. And so people just don't have a deep understanding into running a business. And so they see a service, they see it's popular, they think to themselves, well, it must be making money, or it must at least have a path to revenue. So let's just go create our account, let's go upload gigabytes of data and call it good. And oh, look, they have a monetization plan. I can pay them pittance for this, and that's surely going to cover it. And the reality is in the background, they were always going to either end up getting sold or having to go for another round of funding, which would just bring in more interest and more opinions on how a company should be run, which that wouldn't have been great either. This was always coming. So the reaction should be tempered with that understanding. But I just don't think you can expect that from the general public. It's just sort of why really you should just avoid comments.
But can I expect it from the professional financiers and from the CEOs of these companies?
You should be able to, yeah.
I got to be honest. I know everybody loves Netscape. Netscape should never have gone public because it didn't turn a profit. I think when we're all dead and we're like the Roman Empire and some other civilizations writing our history, the IPO of Netscape, being able to IPO running a loss, is going to be a pivotal point in our economic failure. You're not a real business until you turn a profit. You're just not. Yes, businesses have losses, and I'm not talking about accounting losses that one might use to, the IRS counts a lot of things as losses that aren't cash losses, right? I get it. I'm saying, did the business make more money than it lost on a simple mercantilist cash basis, not on a tax code basis? And it's very clear to me that many of these startups that we've seen acquired, WhatsApp and, we can go down the list if we really
Instagram,
want to.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Instagram, simply didn't make any money. That worries me.
Even YouTube, right? I mean, look, YouTube was bought out
YouTube lost money. YouTube was bleeding money, right? Google was actually an angel of mercy for YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the fact that YouTube sold for a lot less than WhatsApp tells you that things have gone. Chris, you and I were predicting a bubble a few years ago. It never happened. It never burst. But there's still something fundamentally wrong with the economics here, because these companies buying these other smaller companies are not realizing economic value.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose these trillion value companies, Microsoft and Apple, are not helping the average there. They can afford to spend crazy amounts of money. Although they got a great deal on that GitHub purchase, because they bought it was $7.56 billion in stock. Stock, not cash.
Yeah, I don't understand how anybody I would be selling that Microsoft stock so fast.
They got a great deal.
Yeah,
they got a really good deal. And maybe that's
because GitHub's business model didn't work. They simply needed to charge more money, but Atlassian undercut them with Bitbucket.
Yep.
And GitLab is a thing that exists, right? We had their CEO on it, and it's cheaper, and you can self-host it for free.
But honestly, there was a hard ceiling there on what they could charge.
Right, but the biggest threat to them was not GitLab, because people don't want to self-host. It was Bitbucket, because freaking Atlassian was like, yeah, so we'll just bleed forever.
Yeah.
Because we have HipChat and we have Jira, and our whole goal is to push you into our whole Atlassian suite. Mm-hmm. So yeah, sure, unlimited repos, $20 a month, done. Remember when GitHub used to charge you per repo?
Yeah.
I remember that. It was real expensive.
When there's industries where there is no competitor to the service, like a couple of the production services that we have, they could be $1,000 a year. They can be a couple $100 a month. I mean, they can just charge outrageous prices because there's simply zero competition. GitHub did not have that luxury.
So I think XMN, so Xerox, Mike, I forgot what N is. Sam, I'm so messed up.
Ninja, always go with Ninja.
Yeah, I'll go with Ninja.
Always
but
go
I
with
know
Ninja.
That's not right. Makes a good point that the business model is not what I'm thinking. It's simply to set up a company to be bought by other companies. It reminds me of the Silicon Valley scene where Action Jack Barker's talking to Richard Hendricks and said, "I will never compromise the product of the company." And Richard says, "You mean the algorithm? No. You mean me? No, I mean the stock, you idiot.
Yeah.
Right.
Also a ding for that one.
But
Earning
it's
those
all
dings.
fake. Like, this is not a real economy. It's just not. And if it is, then let me go get a couple $1 million to build Alice up.
There you go.
Right?
There you go.
Like, I did have VC offerings, but they were too draconian.
Yeah.
Because God forbid the CEO actually draw a salary. Yeah, just like...
Yeah, I'm watching the same thing happen to the podcast industry in a big way, super fast.
Yeah, I'm super worried about
At
it.
a
We should talk about
supercharged
that.
pace. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, like a bunch of big tech companies are like outsourcing podcasts and just putting their logos on them.
Microsoft has launched
Yep.
a couple, and
Exactly who I was thinking of.
yep. It's just right there. Yeah, it's interesting times. It's interesting times. Same with Red Hat. Red Hat's done the same thing. So on both ends, I got commercial companies that are nipping at the heels. Now their podcasts aren't that great yet, but you know,
They'll get there.
eventually. If 200 of them launch a podcast, 30 of them will probably be good.
Right. So where does this leave us but a little sad, which is my old line.
Well, I actually, you see, I am a believer in when the industry closes a door, it opens a window. I do think that is true. I think there's other opportunities that just changes the way you think. It involves a lot of shifting, things like that. Maybe it's time to become a dark matter developer again.
Or maybe like Linux Action Show.xxx.
Oh, there you go. That would
The
definitely
real
work.
Linux Action Show.
Yeah.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, live streamed, powered by Linux.
Hey, I just want to say we could have a real good animation for Pop OS. I just want to throw that out there.
No. Oh, no.
Get it out of here.
That's what I say to that. Well, Mr. Dominic is...
I got one more. Plasma Desktop.
It's
Seriously, it's
negative
made
in
for
the freedom dimension.
Oh no, it's all free, baby.
All right, well, tell people where they can get more Dominic in their life until next time.
At Dumunuko on Twitter, and you can hear more of my socialist rants.
Yeah, that's how I describe it. All right, well, you can follow me on the Twitter. I'm at Chris LAS. The whole darn network is at Jupiter Signal. Links and stuff like that, subscribe links and whatnots. Coder.show. You can get all of that at Coder.show. We do this show typically live on Mondays. You can get our live times at jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar. And we have full-time contracted robots, chicken farmers, if you will, that will convert that to your local time. Thanks so much for tuning in this week's episode of the Coder Radio program. See you right back here next week. IRC room's kind of like our chicken farmers a little bit. Like, we got our own chicken farmers.
Shit rolls downhill.
All right, so jbtitles.com. What are we going to name this thing? Netscape killed real companies, chicken farmer economy, and then just chicken farmers.
We need to start interviewing people who are much more positive on life than we are.
Yeah, you never know. Things may change. There may be a change, a new blowing of the wind. Things may get better.
Have something. That means you have something you're working on. Aw. That's what that means.
I can't say if that's true or not. So let's see. Yeah. So bam, 2 shows right there, and then I guess we get back here next Monday we do it all over again.
Yeah, we may have that other thing next Monday too.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah.
Speaking of a changing of the wind.
So you'll see here. Go refresh. Yeah. So what do those guys do? What is their thing? I saw you were.
They do a cross-platform UWP implementation that runs on Windows, iOS, and Android.
Oh.
They've been getting a lot of press, and I've been playing with their stuff. It's pretty good.
That's interesting. That is interesting. Yeah, that's good timing too. Like I was saying, the Microsoft stuff seems to be playing well right now. Microsoft must be on an upswing if our audience is becoming more interested in it, which is really interesting. This used to be the place to avoid Microsoft.
Yeah, it's just, And welcome to our new co-host, Scott Guthrie.
You know, we need is Paul Thurrott. Come on. If we're going to go all in, we need Paul Thurrott.
No, we're just going to go for the Rage show. Yeah, and this sucks too. So
yeah, right. Paul Thurrott, though, seems to be down to do anybody's shows. Like, he doesn't seem to have any kind of, like, cutoff. Like, doesn't matter who you are. If you ask Paul Thurrott, he'll do a show with you, it seems.
As long as you link back, he's pretty much okay.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah.
I kind of respect that. So slack me about the change in the wind.
Yeah, I will. Yes. It's all good. It's all good.
Oh, I'm not worried. I'm thinking you're going to admit that you're finally a Windows 7 user.
That, I was looking at my domains, all the domains that I own today, actually. And the funny thing was I had these domains for like Windows 7 HD editing, Win7editor.com, all these different like Windows 7 base. Because for a while, before I got all into Hackintoshes, I did try to make it all work on Windows 7. But
yeah,
that didn't really last. Well, Mr. Dominic, what do you think? Should we call this thing? I mean, I mentioned Chicken Farmers about 100 times. We also have Netscape killed real companies.
Let's just call it Chicken Farmers. I love it.
Okay. Well, nobody's voting because nobody can be bothered, apparently.
Well, this is how you get things that don't work out so well.
All right, Mr. Dominic, well, have yourself a nice afternoon, and I will talk to you next week.
Talk to you next week.
All right, bye darling.
Bye.
Bye, Z's. All right, chat room. So tomorrow, I see we may have a guest on the program. Let's see if he got back to me. So I can tell you right now, we'll have a guest presenter. Mr. Payne is out on the road, and so Brent, who has been on the show once before, he talked about professional photography on GNU/Linux, will be joining us. And I'm in. I had some weird. Last time I tried. Also. Oh, okay, cool. All right, so we'll have some guests. How do I want to do that? Let me think about that. All right. So, yeah, we're going to have Matthew Miller on the show to talk about Fedora Core OS tomorrow on Linux Unplugged. And we will have Brent, so it should be a lot of good stuff. So I would encourage you to join us because that should be a good live show, I think. All right, that's all I have for you. I will get out of here. I will turn off the streams. We will do all those things. We'll get the reruns going if you're sticking around the JB Live TV stream. Thank you for being here. Hope you enjoyed the doubles as we did them. What is this? Hey, that's nice. Oh, yeah, that's nice. And then I have another one here, too. Let's see what this is. That's just like a little jingle. That's just what we got there. We got ourselves a little jingle. Got ourselves a little jingle right there. Mm-hmm. All right, live stream. I'm going to get the shenanigans out of here. It's good to be back in Seattle, back in the Studs, broadcasting from JB1. And it's going to be much easier doing Linux Unplugged tomorrow from JB1. Thank you for joining us. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.